Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Barrens Chat podcast. I'm Sod, and with me tonight is my co-host Guck. This is a podcast about World of Warcraft by two guys who play it. Guck, it's here. The content drought has ended again for Classic WoW. BWL drops tomorrow. Are you pumped to get in there? How's your schedule looking?
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. I think the fact that we got a pretty good pacing for content through January means that we may be heading into another drought, but the good thing is that we are getting the official start to Phase 3. Blizzard's calling it a Phase 3 Part 2. The big part of it, the one part that everyone's going to be really excited about, I think, is Blackwing Lair, right? So BWL, we're finally getting our next official raid. Everyone has been spending a ton of time in the Molten Core and in Onyxia's Lair, and finally, instead of just the same bosses over and over again, now you'll be able to do a more quick clear of Molten Core and Onyxia while you're just kind of grabbing those last few pieces, getting those mats, whatever it is you need from skinning and whatnot. And, hopefully that takes up a lot less of your time by now. So now you'll have your regular raid again. You'll have Blackwing Lair, which for people they're going to be progressing through for a little bit. I don't think progression through BWL is going to take very long for most guilds, but it will be something that exists, and I think it's going to be great to get into. Some of the other cool stuff that's coming in this kind of Phase 3 Part 2, we're getting the level 50 class quests. So while you're leveling, these are really good, but there are also certain items that are really, really important. I know in the warrior quest line, I think it's a trinket. I'm not sure. I have to go back and check. But I know that these level 50 class quests, class by class, some of them are actually really important, and some of them can even bring, for your off spec, if you, don't tank a lot, maybe there's a tank trinket or something you can get through these class quests. So it's definitely something to look into. There are new reputation rewards. So the ones that people have already been working on, the Argent Dawn, Thorian Brotherhood, that one's big, Timbermaw. All of those faction vendors now have reputation reward items. So these are the items that were back in patches 1.6 and 1.7 of original WoW. Those of you who know what that means, you'll know what you're getting. But if you've been doing the reputation grinding to any extent, you can expect to find something new to purchase. And the big one, the one thing that will make going back and doing your Molten Core more convenient, the eternal quintessence. And these are essentially the quintessences that you use to douse the runes as you go through Molten Core. Now you can, in Phase 3 Part 2, it's such a weird name, you can get one of these eternal quintessences which has a 1 hour cooldown instead of being consumed. So all of these things are pretty nice. It's kind of like a good way to send off the Phase 1, Phase 2 kind of content and really kind of throw everyone into Phase 3 in BWL.
Yeah, I think the cool thing that BWL brings is, right, like your guild is probably going to move Molten Core to an off day, right? I mean, assuming that it's easy to farm for you. So it's just extra stuff for you to do in the game. Like if you're somebody that wants something to do in the game, like to give you a reason to play it, and maybe your guild uses DKP and you can kill those extra bosses in Molten Core that maybe some people don't need. I'm sure there's still plenty of people that need gear from there, but it's an extra way to like boost yourself in your raid and show that like you show up more. And if you like, just the environment showing up too, I think that's really cool. It just gives you extra content to consume that, that can add on to like your regular play schedule if you have the free time for it.
Yeah, and to that's kind of a double-edged sword, because you can think of like obviously if you really enjoy your raid group, now that there's another raid, you can spend more time with those people. But if you've been in a raid group that you haven't really liked, going into this next phase means that you're going to be spending that much more time raiding with them if you're still committed to raiding despite not really enjoying the company. So keep that in mind as you go into Phase 3. This might be, before the tier really gets rolling, it might be a good time for you to reconsider your spot in your guild.
Yeah, that's true. And also, too, I mean, if you have alts, right? I mean, people are going to be taking mains into BWL. Molten Core is on an off night. Maybe you have an alt that you want to play and get some gear on. take your alt into molten core too. That could be good. I know a couple people that have a couple 60s, like, which is borderline insane to me, but I understand why people have done it. People want to play multiple classes, and maintaining an alt in classic isn't nearly the chore that it is in retail currently. But I think it's awesome. I think BWL is probably one of the better raid tiers out there. Like, a lot of people like that. It's not too much trash. I mean, you do have that gauntlet in there that's tough, but for the most part, that raid is a lot of bosses. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think one of the good things too is it's another one of those really obviously vanilla raids. You think of Molten Core and Ragnaros as, basically almost the quintessential WoW vanilla raid boss, right? Like everyone really thinks about Ragnaros, even though uh, you know big ticket items like AQ and Nax were kind of at the end of Classic. Well, at that point, at the end of Vanilla. I think getting into BWL will not only see a return in players, much like what we saw with the release of Battlegrounds. I think Battlegrounds release brought back a ton of classic players. I don't expect to see that many come back for BWL, largely because the raiding community is kind of tight knit. You have a large group, and for the people that have been putting their time in that 40-man group, you kind of find your role, and people kind of get comfortable in their spot. So I'm eager to see how many people do end up returning to raid, just because like it's going to be a great raid. And I mean, like with any WoW content release, when the raid comes, people jump for it, and rightly so. So I'm excited to see people come back.
Yeah, I've been thinking about making a trip back, but unfortunately, I don't have my attunement yet, so it's something I gotta bang out. But maybe I'll come back and dabble. I have like leveled an alt very casually, like it's like level 10 right now in classic, and I enjoy it, but it's something I'm just gonna do super casual when I'm kind of over the retail grind, which is happening like more and more. And once I get AOTC, it'll probably be all out classic from there.
Yeah, and remember, the attunement for BWL isn't nearly as crazy as Onyxia, even though it's fairly similar. It's still around UBRS. There's a guy you have to loot, but I'm pretty sure the looted item has like a 75% drop rate, so you will find it. But it involves you touching that glowing orb behind Dracasath. So it's essentially you just kind of get this high drop rate letter. You do an Uber's run that's a full run. You go to the orb, and boom, you're attuned. So it's not as bad. It's as bad as just getting into a group for a full Uber's run once you have the quest item. But it is still something that you have to do. And remember, with this coming out on Wednesday, so that's going to be 3 p.m. Pacific on Wednesday, the 12th. So tomorrow, when our episode goes live, you want to be attuned already. So, Tuesday night after you guys listen, or while you're listening, you should definitely do your best to get in there. Make sure you get your letter. I believe it's called Black Hands Command, whatever the item is called, and then go and run your Uber's run so that you're ready to go.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like it's such a weird day to release something on an NA schedule. Is it like a worldwide release? Is it releasing in Europe too at the same time? Because
Yes.
I
So
was gonna
they've
say
said
that's
it's, yeah, all realms.
yeah, that's how they do like the expansion release. I think that's kind of cool. Maybe like maybe there will be a world first race in classic. Pay attention to the Twitch streams and see who gets Nefarian down first. That'll be really cool to watch actually.
Yeah, I honestly don't see why that wouldn't happen. I like there will be an unofficial race for world first. I don't think it's going to be as well produced or as well advertised as the method streams or the limit streams are. But I mean, much like what we saw with the race for world first in Molten Core, not really a no-name guild, but it wasn't Method who got it, right? It wasn't the biggest team with the most eyes on them. So yeah, if you dig through Twitch, I'm sure in the coming weeks you'll be seeing a lot of what will become the unofficial race for BWL World First.
Yeah, and I think like the cool thing about it, like we can get into the world first race. Like North America won, Limit won, and they beat Method by over 2 days, which means that the day head start that they got didn't matter. And I just think it was so cool to watch. Like Max, which is weird. He has more viewers than the Complexity Limit stream the entire time, and probably because people want to listen to the comms and see how they communicate. But such a cool accomplishment. Like I watched the kill live, and it was just so cool to hear everybody get all pumped up in Discord and scream it. Like that's so awesome to see. That's what it's all about. Like for them, it's getting cutting edge and being the world first. But like for a lot of people, like when it happens to me, it's killing a boss that you've wiped on 70 times, and you finally get that kill. And Discord bumps like that, and that's awesome. That's what this game's all about: accomplishing something as a community and just being proud of it. And I think that was so cool to see and so cool to watch. And I'm really looking forward to. I think honestly, this race is going to make the first initial race in Shadowlands that much better because it's going to be Method essentially won every tier that mattered in BFA other than the Crucible, and North America hasn't had a win since Missa Pandaria up until last week. So I think that's just so cool. And the race going into it with Method and Limit both leading the way. I'm really excited for the Shadowlands release and the first raid tier in it just to watch that.
Yeah, yeah. Method's coming off of a loss. Limit's coming off of a win. The roles have reversed. We have finally NA raid hype. Like who knows what kind of talent might come out of the shadows. For Shadowlands, right? Look at that phrasing. So that would be pretty cool. It would be awesome to see some like really good NA based WoW competitive raiders come out of the woodwork, get into there, and really kind of reinvigorate this NAEU world first race that we basically are now finally contending with. I mean, it's basic, like you've said, it's basically always been Method, it's always been EU, but number one, baby, number
Yeah,
one.
yep. And don't count out the Asian guilds or the Russian guilds either. I mean, there's still a lot of talented players. You occasionally see their streams. I know in the first advertised race, you'd see the Russian guilds in there, and I just think that race is so cool to watch, and especially the comms and see how it goes. I know Limit was getting a little bit of heat because Max didn't physically raid; he raid led while watching somebody else's screen. But I think that was awesome, and I think if Blizzard could implement a way for a guild that maybe has 21 guys and a talented raid leader that has a hard time managing raid leading and his own ability to play. That'd be a neat way for a lot of guilds to implement it.
Yeah, so I would like to say if you have a problem with Max just raid leading, then you just shouldn't be enjoying competitive gaming because on so many different platforms, there are CS:GO coaches, there are WoW Arena coaches. Like for threes, they have 4 people. So like the idea that there's someone who's not participating directly, but they're participating indirectly, like that is a fundamental aspect of so much competition. Like so that to me is like absurd. You shouldn't have any issues with that. But I do want to say, listening to the comms, Max did such a good job raid leading. He was totally calm up until the moment of the kill. Even in the kill, if you listen to his comms, he's still giving the tanks orders as they're like sub 4%, sub 2%. He like the last thing that he says is to tell the tanks to start kiting because they need to kite out, bring the ads that spawn out of the like little bit of clear space remaining and into the shit that's spawned on the sides. But like he was so focused on it. He called out the invuln soaks. So like hunters, mages, DH darknesses, all of that stuff. It was so well executed. It was calm, cool, collected. I thought it was like amazing to see and hear that perspective. And I, my hat goes off to Limit and Max on their performance.
Yeah, and honestly, like every other guild probably competing in this race, it has the means to use a 21st man to raid lead, right? Like every guild competing in this race has a roster of more than 20 players that understands that they're going to have to sit out at some time, and it's certainly possible for a 21st player to sit back and watch the raid and lead like Max did, which like you said, he's calm, cool, and collective. Also think it's like really underrated that he keeps them on point, right? And I think it's cool how lax they were in that kill. Like if you watch early on, they're joking, they're having a good time, they're laughing, they're talking about was it Fired Up's damage? It was somebody's damage initially on the ads that was just shredding them. And
Yeah, they were talking about one of the Fire Mage's Ignite procs, and it was just like melting. And yeah, all through phase 1 and phase 2, they're just joking about it. The one comment that Max makes is like we're just so healthy when they go through the transitions. But yeah, and you got to remember, like when we were doing these mythic kills, the first few phases, like let's think about Croesus, and we did the first few sections of that bridge just so many fucking times that if we took each section of the bridge as seriously as we had the first time, everyone would have been just like emotionally drained by the time we actually got to the kill. So I think it's so important that we got to see and that they did like that really kind of relaxed, chilled out environment for the first few phases. I think that's necessary.
yeah, and I think it was cool. I also think, it's really good of him as a leader to be able to just reel those guys back in, get them to focus, put their game face on when it gets serious. And they did have a couple of hiccups too. It wasn't a perfect pull. They used a couple battle reses, but they still got it down. And just watching it, listening to it, it was so awesome. I'm really, really excited for the next phase. I also think it's cool that, I think the entirety of Limit's raid team, or almost the entirety of Limit's raid team, was in Texas in its complexities gaming area. I don't even know. Is it in Houston or Austin?
It's in Dallas.
Okay,
It's in Dallas.
and but either way, like to have everybody there, like Max said during the week, if you watch it as much as I did, and I watched it an unhealthy amount. These guys go to dinner and they continue to talk about the fight. It's like an extra advantage. It's like, yeah, maybe we need to do this. And nobody's idea gets shrugged off in that raid either. Everybody gives input and they talk about it and discuss it. I think that's one of the more underrated things. Obviously there's very smart, talented players in both of those organizations. It's just so cool to see that in such a professional environment and the way it is. And like Max had over 100,000 views on Twitch when they were doing the last few polls too, which was awesome to see.
Yeah, I think it's all well deserved. I'm really glad to see the attention come back to NA. I mean, and it's even hard to say come back to because I feel like it never really was here. I wasn't raiding during Mist of Pandaria. I feel like EU raiding has always been the dominant thing, or just in general non-NA raiding because Exorcist, Russian, and to some extent Korean and other Asian guilds have been pretty good in the global scheme of things. But yeah, I think this is one of the best ways competitively for the raid scene to end leading into Shadowlands, because now the pressure is on to have such a good first race that it can kind of, feed off of the finale of BFA and transition us into the beginning of Shadowlands. Like I'm really excited for tier 1 of Shadowlands. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, 100%. And it's cool to see how those guys go into the start of the expansion too with they set goals like 3 characters first week, full reset. Like it's that's something I always am intrigued. Like, what are these guys doing for the first week, for the second week? Like, what are they getting accomplished? Like, what does the guild need to succeed? That's something I'll be paying attention to as, Alpha comes out and Beta comes out and they start their game plan and how their prep goes through the rest of the expansion too, right? Because those guys have it down to a science what they need to do to have the goal accomplished, and it all starts on launch day on the day Shadowlands drops, which is cool because they have to level up first.
So the last thing that we really wanted to talk about was how it feels as someone who didn't really play BFA, getting into BFA now purely to experience kind of 8.3, the Nzoth raid, and what the end of BFA is. We have a close friend who is now just getting back into retail. They had already dinged 120. I don't know if they even really raided Uldir. So somewhere between 8.0's release, and Uldir, they stopped playing, and now they're coming back into it. Saad, what are some of the things that you think have stood out about his process?
So he did raid, but it was like a couple of like carry raids where we just took him in, and he got some drops. What? So the issue is, right? He wants to be able to perform on par. This is what we talked about a lot last week with at least at the very least everybody else. So his issue is, and I said to him, I was like, I looked it up. I think it's because you don't have world quests unlocked. He hasn't unlocked world quests yet, right? He dinged. He was fully rested when he leveled, so he didn't finish all the zones, and so it doesn't like none of us knew how to unlock world quests. I was like, hey, just play through your war campaign. So he played through his war campaign, did all that, and then he looked it up, like found it. He has to get friendly with Talanji's expedition, and then he should be able to unlock Nazjatar, which will in turn it'll get his neck to level 50, and it'll give him the quest to talk to Rathian, which will in turn start his chain for the cloak, which is, a long time. I actually started doing the cloak quest on another character that didn't have Nazjatar unlocked. That's how I know all this, because I experimented with it this weekend, and so I'm in the middle of that quest on one of my characters, and so he has. He told me he logged on today. He finished like the war campaign, and now he's questing in Nazmir to unlock world quests to continue his journey throughout BFA. Now, the problem with this is, I guess he could have just boosted a character and then he would have had a world quest unlocked and so on. But this is a guy who came back to the game, maybe isn't sure if he wants to buy Shadowlands, and now he leveled up. And now he wants to play with his friends, and he's hindered because his neck is like level 14, which obviously isn't good enough for anything. You can't even unlock an Azerite trait on any sort of new gear, so that's a problem. He doesn't have world quests unlocked, so he can't do the emissaries. He can't get free gear from that. That's a problem. And the gating, like it's the fact that it's like, oh hey, play through this story, and then you can have this new content. Well, this is an MMO. This isn't like a standard single player RPG where you're trying to tell a story. Yes, you can try to tell the story, but should he have to play through the story if he doesn't want to? No, maybe that's not his style, and it's definitely not his style. You and I both know this is a guy that doesn't like to do his world quests. He doesn't like to play you know what I mean? That's not his thing. He wants to raid. He wants to get on. He wants to raid. He wants to do dungeons. He wants to kill bosses. He wants to be the top damage. The story is not his gameplay.
Yeah, the cutscenes have no bearing on my meters. Okay, I don't care.
And I don't see a problem with that. There's multiple ways. I mean, maybe he wants to create his own story, right? I mean, it's an MMO. That's your thing. You can join an RP server and create your own story. Why do you have to play through this linear experience that Blizzard laid out for you? You shouldn't have to. The story isn't for everybody. I will say they do a good job telling it now because it is linear, but that's like a new thing. That wasn't a thing in Classic. It wasn't a thing in Burning Crusade. It wasn't a thing in Wrath, and it was kind of a thing in Pandaria, but it really picked up over the course of Warlords of Draenor, Legion, and now BFA.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. I would say, and we've mentioned this before, BFA did such a great job with their story through cinematics because they put so much into those high detailed Sourfang, Thrall, Sylvanas cinematics. Those were great. They definitely fell short by not giving us one for Nzoth, but I mean, you have to give them credit for the early stuff. They did do that right. But yeah, I mean, classic, like I think we've talked about this too when we did a classic versus retail, how there's zone lore and each zone has kind of a story that kind of arcs and progresses by the time you finish questing in it. There's like dungeon specific lore, and it's kind of these pockets, these little nodes of info that you can get into if you want to, but you obviously don't have to. But with BFA, yeah, it's just like a straight shot. You have to basically get this idea out of the story. Sure, you could pick which zones you go to when, but the story kind of overarches through all of those zones. One of the things that I want to go back into is the gating, because I think the gating that Jorik has had to go through is just like complicated and crazy. So let me know if I got this right. You start out as a character that dings 120. And if you ding 120 naturally, you don't automatically have access to world quests. So to get them, you need to have friendly with your three starting factions, and that will unlock world quests. Is that correct?
That is the gist of it. I think you have to have at least all your footholds unlocked in the war campaign too. I would think. I'm not 100% on that because obviously, like you and I, like I unlocked world quests on like the second or third day of the expansion. So I don't remember at all. Like, do
Yeah,
you?
I don't remember. Yeah. But after you've unlocked world quest, that allows you because I know there's different elements that they've added in. There's like different messengers of Magni or representatives for Rathian uh, that are just kind of like in the world, and they have a quest available for you some at some point. I don't know what triggers it, but once he gets world quests, he will then because remember he couldn't get into the chamber of the heart. So like if he gets world quest, does that mean now he can go into the chamber and then in there are his cloak quests? Like
Oh
it seems so
no.
confusing.
So that see, this is how I tested it over the weekend. I went on a character because he didn't have the quest to go to Nazimir, so I logged on a character that I leveled in Korax that I know hasn't done that, and I logged on. I had the quest, I abandoned it, and I logged out. I immediately logged back in, and the quest popped up for me. So I was like, Joe, I mean, it should just pop up for you. He's like, no, it's not there. And I was watching him on Discord streaming it at the time. So I was like, man, I wonder what the deal is. And I thought about it. I had him open up his map and I noticed he didn't have World Quest. So that's what I'm assuming it was. We still don't even know if that's the case. He hasn't unlocked them yet. So we might come back next week and still have no idea.
That's crazy. So yeah, that's nuts. But even if it is, just the idea that it basic like the starting process through that, like all of the stuff you have to do in Uldum and all the stuff you have to do in Vale, and how all of that is basically, I think, is that scaled around the item level of someone who's been doing Najatar content.
I would imagine it is. I did the assault on like a 390 prot warrior. It wasn't too bad. I wasn't trying to take on elites by myself or anything like that, but it wasn't that bad trying to do it. I mean, I was a tank, so it took me a while to kill it anyway. So I don't really have a good like DPS set to judge it off of. But yeah,
Right, but you remember getting into Najatar the first time off of a character that hadn't been doing
oh, it was
Battle
brutal.
of Dazarlor
It
stuff,
was
right? That was brutal.
terrible.
Yeah. So like I imagine that I don't know, they have to scale it differently. Like it just seems like having a brand new character go in for 8.3, that there are a lot of hurdles in the way.
Yeah, and I don't think that's good. It's just the gating. I mean, they gate everything. In the essence, I still don't have the rank 3 essence for the Uldum rep because you need to get it was exalted. You need to get revered now. So, but I'm running that essence at rank 2 because I need it for the corruption resist because I can't wear half the gear I'm getting. I mean, granted, have I been getting lucky with corruption? Yeah, sure, but can I use the gear? No, that sucks. It's worse. So I would say it's borderline worse than Titan forging.
Yeah, early on it was 100% worse than Titan Forging because of the way that certain individual corruption effects would just way outweigh item level and anything else you were doing in your rotation. I think that always is an obvious sign of a just poorly tuned, poorly thought out system. So because they released something like that, I think it's clear that they didn't look into how well it should have been balanced and implemented. I think it's a worse system than Titan Forging. What I hope is that after corruption goes away, Titan Forging does not come back, and that's the one silver lining from the system.
It's just flat gear. Like you do Mythic Plus and you get an increased item level, but it doesn't Titan Forge, and maybe you get a little higher item level in your chest or your weekly cash. I think that'd be fine. But just getting gear that I can't use or like having gear that I had to cleanse, that sucks. I'm making my gear worse. Who wants to do that? I want to be able to shred meters, and I'm actually decently geared too. Like my item level's somewhat high for heroic slash normal raider. I actually still haven't even killed normal Nzoth. I haven't killed Nzoth at all yet, but I'm like 7 or 8 out of 12 heroic. So like I'm pushing through. I'm grinding through, and I get gear, and then I'm like, shit, I can't even use this. This sucks, and I just have my bag is just littered with gear with corruption, and I'm still trying to replace some of my gear from the Eternal Palace.
Yeah, and you got to remember with you, it's like when it rains, it pours, and you're getting all this corruption. With some people, if they do get corruption, they're not getting the good effects. Some people aren't getting good corrupted gear at all. There's a lot of people complaining about I mean, that's the same kind of RNG that people suffered through with Titan forging, right?
Yeah,
And
and
if you think
legendaries.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Yes, dude, because it makes people quit playing. Like not getting the right RNG on your legendaries and Legion made people quit playing because it was such an important thing. And with Titan forging, it's borderline that important, but now that corruption is something that has even more of a potential effect, it outpaces it and it's borderline like the Legion legendaries and obviously because we're close to the end of the expansion, it's going to make people quit early. Like it's just dumb.
Yeah, but I will say this: if they were going to experiment with something like this, now is the time to do it. Right?
That's true.
It's a bad expansion. Most people say it's a bad expansion. It's probably one of the worst. It'll go down as one of the worst. Even people that have played the entire way through say that. So you know what? This is the right time to test it. I'm glad that you did test it now, as much as I hate it, and it's making me frustrated. Please don't bring it back for Shadowlands. Please. Please don't even bring a system like it. Don't try to bring it into the game. If you want to make gear that has cool effects, throw it in trinkets like every other thing. That's how it's been, and it like even the trinket off Gul'dan, I think it was like the Dark Whisper or something like that. That had a negative effect, but it was still my best in slot trinket, and it was fine. The negative effect didn't bother me. It was my best trinket, regardless of the negative effect. So, if you want to do stuff like that, find another way. Don't do it in every single slot of gear or make it RNG. That's the
Yeah.
worst.
Like it's all we already have RNG in the way that we get our items, right? Most items you cannot pick what you're going to get. You just get an item off of the loot table. So make those effects a ring, make it a trinket, like you said, make it an on use effect on a back piece, like whatever. Bring back activatable helms. Like I don't care. Just do something different that isn't an additional layer of RNG to something that's already randomness that we've accepted, right? It's not a rewarding system. It's something that just forces players to gamble their time in exchange for things that they should have a little bit more agency in getting.
Yeah, and you have to grind your cape to be able to use that gear too, right? So it adds another grind to it on top of the grinds that you're already doing. So that being said, I do like horrific visions. I don't always have time to do them, but that is good content, and I don't mind it. So don't hesitate to put more content like that in the game.
Yeah, I think they did a really good job with those. I like the fact that there are like fully optional side sections that you can go to. There are the extra difficulty through the masks. There's a lot of depth to that content. And for me, I have experienced the surface level of it, and I'm curious to see what it's like to see a full mask run or to even participate in a full mask run, but I don't know if I want to spend the time necessary to get there.
Yeah, to get the gear, and like it is mandatory to do the extra events to level your cloak up, but it's not mandatory to kill the last boss when you do those events. So it might take you a little extra time and a little extra of coalescing visions to farm, but it is possible to level your cloak up without being a top tier player and completing the event every time, which is good.
All right, I think that's about all I have for this week. Is there anything else you want to mention?
No, that's it.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it as always. Rate, review us, Apple Podcast. Follow us, Barrens Chat Pod on Twitter. barrenschatpodcast.podbean.com. I think that's our website. What's our website? barrenschat.podbean.com.
Yes, and barrenschatpod@gmail.com.
No one listens to this far in the episode, so I'm going to leave this in. Fuck it. If you heard this, put it in the review. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.